Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the 30th of the 11th month on our Creator's calendar, which happens to line up with the 8th of February, 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. And we're continuing with our study and read through of the book of Yobelim, a segue from the book of Shemot or Exodus, as Moshe is on Mount Sinai with our Mashiach with the pillar of cloud covering, and they're spending the 40 days and 40 nights there, where he's getting not only all the ordinances of the common law of the first covenant, everything that was established that he had written down in the book of the law, which is a roll, a Torah scroll, if you will, of you want to call them the first five books in the first person written by Moshe himself, that is literally in a drawer that's in the Ark of the Covenant behind it. This was discovered and acknowledged, witnessed to by Ron Wyatt. It is still there, preserved, perfectly intact, along with the Ark and the tables of stone that were taken out of it. You can listen to his testimony and many witnesses of that all over YouTube today, probably on other parts of the internet as well. So I won't bother you with that right now. But that was written by Moshe. What was given by the messenger of his presence is what we're covering, what I believe we're covering right now, or at least the translation and versions of that came down to us. So we're currently on Yobelim chapter 8, where the earth is divided into three parts for Shem and Ham and Japheth. We've covered where Noach has exhorted righteousness to his children, telling them what came before, acknowledging writings from Hanok, or who we call Enoch, but Hanok, of his ancestors that were given to him, as well as the writings of his fathers, his own writings that he would have, and he, as we'll see, passed them down to Shem. Uh, a lot of what we don't have in these writings is the nitty-gritty of the history, the reasons for a lot of what was going on that we see, like why was there idolatry in Egypt? Why were they worshiping cows there and having different things sacred, but doing different types of idolatry in Babylon? Where did these things come from? These histories aren't gone into in great detail in the Bible itself. We do have more detail, little bits here and there in the hidden writings, like you can see in the book of Yobelim here. There's also the foretellings in the animal apocalypse about the characteristics of people before the flood and after, and how they were similar to one another, where you can infer that the same types of evils that the Titans, Nephilim, giants were doing, and men amongst them, particularly of the line of Cain, it was carried on afterwards through the instigation of demons afterwards, which we'll see more clearly just explained but not gone into in detail here. There's a Phoenician history that I've had the pleasure of finding that actually ties in these things. It connects the pagan mighty ones of Greece, Egypt, and Babylon to the literal genealogy of Ham and the errors that were being brought in, which is directly mentioned by Kepha, Shimon Kepha, in the recognitions of Clement during his preaching throughout his going north through to Antioch and into Rome, which anyone can read at their leisure in the Clementine homilies and recognitions of Clement. But we're going to go ahead and get into this, and Father willing, we'll check a little bit into the book of the Genesis Apocryphon that we carried, or we looked at last week as well, because it has some relevant things about the dividing of the earth. But we're not going to get into too much detail about the things outside of Scripture, although I very much would like to recommend that for your study. If you want to know real history, which is important, we're told that there's gaps in history. We're told that there's missing sections and there's a lot of confused things. We're told many different stories about why there's so many long length dynasties that are supposedly continuous in Egypt, and they make stuff to be an issue that isn't. This history here talks about those very things and has a very correct order of looking at what they were, why they were, and what was known at the time that is generally not even explained to us anymore. So I'll leave that for now and we'll get into this, but I will be addressing that as we go along just to point out that these are real men that had real lives that affected their posterity for generations. Sadly, the ones that got caught up into worshiping the adversary and being users of what we'd call witchcraft or magic, they were venerated as mighty ones later on that carried on for a very long time. And as I'd mentioned before, the keeping of pagan festivals is literally the commemoration of the first antichrists, where they put themselves in place of the true man who came as Elohim, right? Who is king, and they usurp all these things for themselves. But we'll get to that in the course of time. So Yobelim chapter 8 says, in the 29th Yobel, or Yobelim, in the first week, 1373 Anno Mundi, in the beginning thereof, a Parkshad took to himself a wife, and her name was Razu Iya. Razu, or Rasu Iya. And remember, or if you're not familiar, in Francis Roslin's Maseroth, he gives an etymology for a parkshad that means a congregation assembled. I don't know exactly how it's derived off the top of my head, but he's going over the genealogies and how it ties into the constellations and the parallels there. This is the daughter of Susan, the daughter of Elam. And you remember the Elamites were a people during the time of Abram, but they ceased to be a people when possibly beginning with Abram's conquering of his king in liberating his nephew there. But the Elamites ceased while Susan was a known city that was where Elam had dwelt that continued all the way through to the times of the Persians and beyond. Shushan, it's mentioned in Ezra, or not Ezra, I'm sorry, Esther, Hadassah, Hadasha is her name in the Hebrew, but we know her as Esther from the Greek, right? Either way, it says the daughter of Susan, the daughter of Elam, and she bare him a son in the third year of this week, 1375 a.m. And he called his name Cain-am, of Cain, the people of Cain. And that's whether his real name or a foretelling there, the reason why is made apparent right here because of what he chose to do. Okay. And the son grew, and his father taught him writing, and he went to seek for himself a place where he might seize for himself a city. And he found a writing which former generations had carved on the rock. And he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it, and sinned owning to it. For it contained teaching of the watchers in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun and moon and stars in all the signs of Shamayim. So this is what we would call astrology or the writings, but what Hanok mentions that the watchers gave about the signs of the stars to their children. It was written in stone, preserved after the flood, and then transcribed and studied by him, who passed it down to his children, who would be known as the Kasdim in Hebrew. That means it's not the literal meaning, but you can look at Kaf is like or as, and Shaddai or Shadim is demons. So to be like demon like is the astrologers there. Either way, they know them as Chaldeans in English. That's not the real name for them, but it was the Babylonian astrologers that's where they got their information from. It says, and he wrote it down and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Noach about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. And in the 30th Yobel, 1429 AM, in the second week, in the first year thereof, he took to himself a wife, and her name was Milcah, the daughter of Madai, the son of Japheth. You remember, Madai didn't want to stay in his own land, but I want you to pay attention. The, the daughter of Madai, Milcah, the son of Japheth, is now in the line of Shem, a progenitor of Abraham. And you're going to see here in a minute that so is Nimrod, Nimrod's daughter, who is of the line of Cush, of the line of Ham. Before our forefather Abraham was ever born, you have all the genealogy of Noah in his line. Just for anyone who's racist, right? There's really no call for it. But it says, now her name was Milcah, the daughter of Madai, the son of Japheth, and in the 40th year, 1432 AM, I'm sorry about that, he begat a son and called his name Selah, for he said, truly, I have been sent. And that's what Selah, like the Selakim, the Shaliakim, are his emissaries or sent ones. It's also where we get Eric Bissell in his Erictology. He mentions that we get the English word shellac, where you're sending the suds across the table from that same root. But in the fourth year, he was born, and Selach grew, meaning in the fourth year of this week, right? Of the 30th Yobel, the second week. This is in the fourth year he was born, and Selach grew up and took to himself a wife, and her name was Ma'uk, the daughter of Kesed, his father's brother. In the 31st Yobel, in the fifth week, in the first year, or 1499 AM thereof. And remember, these dates right here, while they're pretty consistent internally, they do not agree with the chronology in the Masoretic text or in the Septuagint, where it's about 300 years off from the flood. The Masoretic text says that the flood happened about 1600 AM, where this had it about the 1300s. It's still in the second day, literally the only work that he did, but in this genealogy, you have more time. You have from the 1300s till the 1800s when Abraham was born, instead of the 1600s, which gives it far less time for all these things to happen. Getting back on track here. It says, and she bare him a son in the fifth year, 1503 AM, thereof. And he called his name Eber. They say Heber, right? Or Eber. And he took unto himself a wife, and her name was Azurad, the daughter of Nibrud. In the 32nd Yobel, in the seventh week, in the third year thereof, or 1564 Anamundi. Now, Nibrud is the Greek name for Nimrod. Nimrod is a biblical figure mentioned in the book of Genesis and books of Chronicles, the son of Cush and thereof a great-grandson of Noach. He was the grandson of Ham, right? Which was the first magician, as mentioned by Kepha, or the first one to pick up, Satan, spirits and magic and doing things like that, which we're not supposed to be involved with. But the point is, 1503, Eber's born, and he marries Nimrod's daughter in 1564. That is the great great grandfather of Abraham, a few hundred years before he's born. And this is not something where he's contemporary with Nimrod when this is his daughter. It's just another witness to those facts because we have a lot of confusion. It says, in the 6th year, 1567 AM, thereof she bare him a son, and he called his name Peleg, for in the days when he was born, the children of Noah began to divide the earth amongst themselves. For this reason, he called his name Peleg, or division. And they divided it secretly amongst themselves, and told it to Noah. And it came to pass, in the beginning of the 33rd Yobel, 1569 AM, that they divided the earth into 3 parts, for Shem, and Ham, and Japheth, according to the inheritance of each, in the 1st year, in the 1st week, when one of us who had been sent was with them. And he called his sons, and they drew nigh to him, and they and their children, and he divided the earth or land into the lots, which his 3 sons were to take in possession. And they reached forth their hands and took the writing out of the bosom of Noah their father. And there came forth on the writing as Shem's lot in the middle of the earth, which he should take as an inheritance for himself and for his sons for the generations of eternity, from the middle of the mountain range of Rapha, from the mouth of the water of the river Tina. And his portion goes towards the west through the midst of this river, and it extends till it reaches the water of the abysses, or the what we call the oceans, right? Or the great seas, out of which this river goes forth and pours its waters into the sea Ma'at. And this river flows into the great sea. And all that is towards the north is Japheth's, and all that is toward the south belongs to Shem. Okay, so I don't know exactly what it's trying to say there in great detail, like 'cause I don't know the names of all those places, but what I infer there, you have the mountains of Rapha right here. The Tina River you can see is coming down, and this is into the Ma'at, or what we'd call the Black Sea. And then that has a river going into the Great Sea, which is the Mediterranean. Everything north of that, right here, was Japheth's, and everything south, right here, was Shem's. That was what was talked about. Nothing over here was given at that time, and nothing south of that over here is mentioned. But God willing, you can see, and for everyone that's looking at this, this would be the east where Shem is at. This would be the north. This would be the Caucasus Mountains, right? The mountains of Asher here, the Tigris River, Ashur, Aram, Aparkshad. Right here is the Nile. They call it the Gihon here, whether that's accurate or not, I'm not going to contest it. But again, they also explain that this is going to be Eden in some of their translations because it's right on the border of Ham's allotment there. But getting back on track. It says, and it extends till it reaches Carasso. This is in the bosom of the tongue which looks towards the south. And his portion extends along the great sea, and it extends in a straight line till it reaches the west of the tongue which looks towards the south. For this sea is named the tongue of the Egyptian sea. And it turns from here towards the south, towards the mouth of the great sea, on the shore of its waters, and it extends to the west to Afra, and it extends till it reaches the waters of the Gihon, of the river Gihon, and to the south of the waters of Gihon, to the banks of this river. And it extends towards the east till it reaches the Garden of Eden, to the south thereof. Talking about the border of Japheth reaches till it gets to the Garden of Eden to the south of it thereof, right? So all of the northern area, although Turkey was not given to Japheth as far as I'm aware, that's always been in Shem's allotment. But above that is it's the water line here that's the what they call the demarcation, right? The borderland that's being spoken of. This is an ex Sorry about that. And it extends towards the east till it reaches the Garden of Eden to the south thereof, to the south, and from the east of the whole land of Eden, and of the whole east. It turns to the east and proceeds till it reaches the east of the mountain of Rapha, and it descends to the bank of the mouth of the river Tina. This portion came forth by lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever unto his generations forevermore. All right, so I'm sorry. That was explaining Shem's lot from this part, including that right here, everywhere where Shem was at. Nothing north of these seas, the North Sea or the Black Sea as we know it, nothing north of the Great Sea, or the border is the Great Sea here to the River Gihon. And if you remember, the allotment of land given to the children of Israel was from the Egyptian river to the Euphrates. This area that was taken by Canaan, the sons of Ham, unlawfully. Now, just to be clear, there's mentions in scholarly known histories today about the Hittite kingdom that's throughout Turkey and this area of Lebanon or the Levant, if you will. Whether that was really a Hittite kingdom or it's just hiding things from us, I can't say definitively. I don't have all the information with that. I'm still learning the prehistories that I'm telling you about, but it's great. It's a very interesting thing when you can actually learn the truth behind what Scripture says in conjunction with known history. It's the muddying up of this stuff that we are so confused about and they can lead us astray with. But once you learn it, it helps clear these things up. So, Father willing, we're going to go through all of this and then it'll be clearer as we do so. Verse 18 here, it says, And Noach rejoiced that this portion came forth for Shem and for his sons, and he remembered that, or all that he had spoken with his mouth in foretelling. For he had said, Baruch be Yahuwah Elohim of Shem, and may Yahuwah dwell in the dwelling of Shem. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Kadosh of Kodashim, and the dwelling of Yahuwah, and Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as set apart places facing each other. And he Baruch the El of Elohim, who had put the word of Yahuwah into his mouth, and Yahuwah forevermore. And he knew that a Baruch portion and a Baraka had come to Shem, and his sons unto the generations forever, the whole land of Eden, and the whole land of the Red Sea, and the whole land of the east and India, and on the Red Sea, and the mountains thereof, and all the land of Bashan, and all the land of Lebanon, and the islands of Caphtor, and all the mountains of Senir, and Amana, and the mountains of Asher in the north, and all the land of Elam, Asher, and Babel, and Susan, and Madai, and all the mountains of Ararat, which is the kingdom of Urartu, you remember, which is Turkey, and all the region beyond the sea, which is beyond the mountains of Asher towards the north, a Baruch and spacious land, and all that is in it is very good, or Tov. And for Ham came forth the second portion, beyond the Gihon towards the south, to the right of the garden. Now, beyond the Gihon to the south, right, which is to the right of the garden. That's what they're trying to explain there. Why that is, I don't know, but this is how it's described. And it extends towards the south, and it extends to all the mountains of fire, and it extends towards the west to the sea of Etel, and it extends towards the west till it reaches the sea of Ma'uk, that into which everything which is not destroyed descends. And it goes forth towards the north to the limits of Gadir, and it goes forth to the coast of the waters of the sea, to the waters of the great sea, till it draws near to the river Gihon, and goes along the river Gihon till it reaches the right of the Garden of Eden. And this is the land which came forth for Ham as the portion which he was to occupy forever for himself and his sons unto their generations forever. So you can see it mentions it's from the Gihon to the south to the mountains of fire. Now, Africa is proportioned differently, but the whole continent, if you will, was not apportioned out. This is just the allotment given to each that none were supposed to transgress. None of the other lands were mentioned that I'm aware of. But you can see it goes all the way to Gadir there, just like you have Yefes here on the northern end. And together, that's the Straits of Gibraltar, the Pillars of Hercules, this being the Mediterranean. And then it goes back to the Gihon or the delta of the Nile there, and then along it again. So you can see this was supposed to be Ham's, this was supposed to be Shem's, this was supposed to be Japheth. And we're about to read the rest of that one here. So verse 25 says, And for Japheth came forth the third portion beyond the river Tina to the north of the overflow of its waters. That river Tina might be the Danube today. I I know the Danube goes the other way, so I'm not sure which river that would be in that direction. The Danube goes across through into Germany or into Europe here proper.
And then also, brother, down to Hungary. I've I ran the Danube while I was living in Budapest.
Thank you, brother. It was the Danube that was transversed quite often by our Hebrew ancestors and the Celts going into Europe as they were migrating. Um, and then a tributary off the Danube is the Sereth River, where Arsareth was the first city built there by the Scythians, the Northern Kingdom, the branch of the Northern Kingdom, the remnant, if you will, that repented and kept the law outside of the land that they would not keep in the land. So that's for another time, but um, it does all tie together there. And you get a little bit of an idea of the geography and where they were at. When they first went into captivity, they stayed in the area that was allotted to Shem. And it was only later where they went into the across the Caucasus Mountains, you will, or into Europe for the flowing of the northern kingdom. There were pre-migrations of Hebrews previous to that that were as far as Britain and beyond. But that's a different time as well. Or that's for a different time. So to continue here, and it says, and he had the portion from the river Tina to the north of the outflow of its waters, and it extends northeasterly to the whole region of Gog and to the whole country east thereof. East thereof. There, Gog was always right here, and it's even known as Gog in the Capricornians. It was Gog and Magog was a type of Antiochus Epiphanes that was known. It's in some of the writings from the ante-Nicene patriarchs. It's also mentioned in the I don't know if it's in the Antichrist for Dummies video series itself or in one of the videos that are outside of that playlist, but that the author of those videos talks about Armageddon. And Armageddon, for anyone who's not familiar, Har-Megiddo was the Battle of Esarhaddon in the First World War in 1917, 1918, where the papal power militarily was conquered. That was the Battle of Armageddon foretold in Revelation. So, um, people might not know that, but it ties into things that have already happened. That's for another time, however. How the point is, they had all the area to the east. It's not necessarily over Europe, which is something that I don't know for sure. It's what I'm still trying to figure out. The reason why this is important, the reason why, and you guys, we have to think logically about this. This is imperative. If it's true that this land is allotted to the children of Japheth, whom Shem's children have now come in and conquered or taken over by force many of these areas, they are under the same curse that Canaan was for what they've done. And we can't, and this is why they're in the belly of the beast of Catholicism, unable to repent. It's why the Protestant Reformation in Europe was killed, because they have to leave that area before they can be uncursed from taking that land by force that doesn't belong to them. Our Creator is not a hypocrite. He doesn't play favorites. He doesn't change what he says. If Canaan was cursed for what he did, so are the children that do that, if this is true. If this is not true and this land was uninhabited, where you had Madai come over here and that gave room for them to go here, that's different. I can't say that that did or did not happen. I'm trying to point out to you the facts that are relevant to us as people today. If this is true and we have to repent of this before we can be accepted and he can return, everyone that's a professed believer living in Europe has to leave. But that same thing goes for anyone who's in any land that covenants were made that they broke, because our Creator doesn't play favorites. So we're in a big mess, especially in America too, like a microcosm of all the things that happened before. But it's things that we ought to be prayerfully considerate of. So it said it extends northernly to the north, and it extends to the mountains of Kelt towards the north and towards the Sea of Mauk, and it goes forth to the east of Gadir as far as the region of the waters of the sea. So that mentions that it goes as far as east of Gadir, meaning right here from Gadir, it goes east all the way to the waters of the sea, possibly this one, and all of this allotment would belong to Japheth, just as we were mentioning. These mountains of Ararat, or the Caucasus Mountains, would be the borderland here between Shem and Japheth, just like the waters were, all right here. So it says, and it extends until it approaches the west of Farah, and it returns towards Afrag, and it extends easterly to the waters of the Sea of Ma'at, and it extends to the region of the river Tina in a northeasterly direction until it approaches the boundary of its waters towards the mountain Rapha, and it turns round towards the north. This is the land which came forth for Japheth and his sons as the portion of his inheritance, which he should possess for himself and his sons, for their generations forever. 5 great islands and a great land in the north. Excuse me. You have one, two, three, four, five, right? Whether or not it was those five in particular, um, I can't say. The Hebrews that left Troy landed in different islands, including Sicily. I believe it was Kaftor here. Um, and every time there was an indigenous people that they also lived amongst already, they would either leave or join in with the paganism. And it was always the righteous remnant that left that eventually went out of Spain or Gaul to, well, this would be the British Isle right here, and that would be Mantrojan or Montrose up in what we'd call the northern highlands of Scotland, which was where they founded their first city. The ancient history of Caledonia records that. But this right here is a continuation from that book, the Genesis Apocryphon. It's a map based off of what is in, yeah, the Mauk or Ma'at Sea, right? It's based, that could be the sea that is to the north right there, as opposed to this one. But this is a rendition of the map and the information based off of what's in Yobelim and in this writing. I don't want to get too far into this because I don't remember how much they have a lot where they're talking about it and they go into great detail. This is for a different reading for another time. But you're free to look at this, pause and read it if you want to. I just wanted to show you that there has been a great deal of work done trying to tie these things together where we can be reasonably sure of the allotment of the land. If you were already confused about, or if you were confused at all, that Ham went to Africa, Shem was in the Middle East, and Japheth went elsewhere, this is kind of definitive, right? The problem that we have is we look at the people there now and think that's the people that have always been there, which isn't the case, which is what I'm trying to mention. What we call the Caucasian Europeans were mostly Hebrews that came in from the hordes from the Germanic waves in multiple waves, or from the Celtic peoples that migrated beforehand, none of which were the sons of Japheth. But you do have people like the Finns, the Basques, I believe, and others that are indigenous. The Etruscans seem to have been Shemites that went there that intermixed with them, the sons of Japheth that might have been in the land at the time. That's the part I don't have the full history of. We don't have all the details, so I don't want to make too much conjecture there. Anyways, you can see here they went through a lot of detail. They mentioned the book of Yobelim, the writings of Lamech, the testaments of Louis. These are scholarly men that are looking at this stuff. I've read through it before. It is pretty interesting. And they're trying to make sense of what all these writings are saying. I'm showing this to you that you can see that it's not too far off. It's generally the book of Yobelim is what they used with the Genesis Apocryphon to come up with that map that you just saw that we were looking at here. So like I said, this is something that we'll probably go over at another time in detail just because it is interesting, but a lot of it is not the writing itself. And then when you do get to it, you remember that some of what we had read before, you have a lot of fragments and a lot of things that just aren't in there. Um, that is inclusive for some of the allotment of the land here, if I remember correctly. But that's why they use this and piece it together with the Book of Yobelim to see that they generally are in line with one another. But I didn't want to get too distracted on this part. I just wanted to show you that it does exist. And this is part of looking for multiple witnesses to confirm every matter, where we don't have to just rely on one source. We have the breaking up of the land in Bereshit or Genesis. We have the book of Yobelim and corroborating witnesses elsewhere. So go ahead and get back on to the book of Yobelim here, where we are almost done with chapter 8. And it says, now this is the land which came forth for Japheth and his sons as the portion of his inheritance which he should possess for himself and his sons for their generations forever. 5 great islands, and a great land in the north, but it is cold. And the land of Ham is hot, which goes along with his name too. And the land of Shem is neither hot nor cold, but it is of blended cold and heat. Now, one thing I do want to point out is while they had their dominions divvied up and their portions given by lot right there, even before that time, they had not only cities and houses built elsewhere, each of them had a city in Turkey, if you will, or around the mountains of Urartu, which was their own dominions. And it mentions in some of these antiquities that, like Kronos or Ham, originally founded Belus, which is a city in Phoenicia. And you can find the evidence for that stuff as they were migrating and traveling. So you have to keep in mind that between the flood and the death of Noah was 350 years, where these things were happening in the course of time, but not immediately. As they grew and spread out, they'd already had different houses, different dominions, and different types of things they were doing. It was not immediate that error was brought in amongst their children, but you will see that before Noah died, demons were instigating things amongst his people that were causing problems. The key with that is that in the Phoenician history, in the histories that we can tie together and connect Kronos with Ham, it has that immediately at the death of his father, because of the plagues and the problems that were happening within Ham's dominions for his association with demons, he sacrificed his one of his sons to propitiate that. And that was the beginning of the Kronos eating his children and the men killing their children in pagan worship. It was not the offering of Abraham with Yitzhak. That was different. But it was done after that fact. And it was done to prove that in real piety, a man will do everything that's required of him, even though our Creator will never require us to sacrifice our own literal children for our faults. So it was correcting that while showing that he would still do everything that evil would do. He would have men that would be as obedient. There's another sign in the circumcision that we completely miss. There was circumcision amongst the Egyptians and others that predate Abraham because it was done amongst Ham and paganism. And this history kind of makes that known. But we'll go ahead and continue here. Yobelim chapter 9, it says, and Ham divided amongst his sons, and the first portion came forth for Cush towards the east, and to the west of him for Mitzrayim. Now, Ham was known as Kronos, which was Bel, which was Molech, or the king who was worshipped. Mitzrayim was Mizor, also known as Osiris. And in the recognitions or other places, they'll attribute, I believe, in the two Babylons, Alexander Hislop will attribute Osiris with Nimrod. A lot of these stories would get changed up and intermixed as time went on. But in the original here, these people were identified. We also know that Mitzrayim was the Zoroaster of Bractia, who was killed by lightning, and he is known to have died before his father in this history as well. But it's because they were involved with magic and demons and then suffering the consequences of it. That's the important thing to keep in mind. They were being used for a purpose to lead men away from the truth. It says, and to the west of him for foot or put, and this put was known as all of these guys were venerated as false mighty ones, right? This was Osiris. This put was the I can't remember, but it was not the Python, but a different Parias of the Greeks. I'll have to look that up again. I'm sorry. And I don't really want to have all these pagan mighty ones mentioned in my mouth. I'm not trying to give them any esteem or validity. The point is to show that these were just men that were venerated in idolatrous ways, contrary to the truth. But we can tie them directly with real people right from the word. It says, and Shem also divided amongst his sons, and the first portion came forth for Ham and his sons to the east of the river Tigris, till it approaches the east, the whole land of India, and on the Red Sea on its coast, and the waters of Dedan, and all the mountains of Mibri and Elah, and all the land of Susan, and all that is on the side of Farnak, to the Red Sea and the river Tina. And for Asher came forth the second portion, all the land of Asher, and Nineveh and Shinar, and all the border of India, and it ascends and skirts the river. And for Aparkshad came forth the third portion, all the land of the region of the Chaldees to the east of the Euphrates, bordering on the Red Sea, and all the waters of the desert close to the tongue of the sea, which looks towards Egypt, all the land of Lebanon and Sinir, and Amana to the border of the Euphrates, and that was given for Aparkshad, which was the allotment that later was given to Abraham, right? And for Aram there came forth the fourth portion, all the land of Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates, to the north of the Kasdim, to the border of the mountains of Asher, and the land of Arar. And there came forth for Lud the fifth portion, the mountains of Asher, and all appertaining to them, till it reaches the great sea, and till it reaches the east of Asher his brother. And Japheth also divided the land of his inheritance amongst his sons. Let me, just so you can see real quick, and we've already looked at it, but we'll cover it again. Excuse me. You see, you had Cush first, then to the east, Mitzrayim, then Put, and then Canaan was supposed to be here. But Canaan, seeing the pleasant land, broke the covenant, as we'll read, and he did not go there. And then you see they mentioned where you have Elam, Asher, Aram here, Lud. Lud is in the mountains above, or the mountains of Assyria, or it's mentioned there. And you also have a Parkshad that was given the lot right here. Kesed would be down here. These are the Tigris and the Euphrates. This would be modern day Iraq, and then Kuwait leading to the Indian Ocean. Right here's India there. And I'm sorry, they put the Garden of Eden right here. I don't know why they did that. It mentions in the context now that might be for this writing in the book of Yobelim. It says it seems to have the border of the Garden of Eden right next to Ham's allotment, which would put it here. Having it there would be a little different. I've also heard that it's literally where Babylon was because you have a dry river going this way that's no longer in existence, but it looks like the four rivers could have came right out of there. And then I've also heard that it was north of there in the Mesopotamia area where they literally have a place called Eden today still. None of these places can be confirmed by men today to be legitimate. There's also mention of it in Yobelim where it's in the north center where we'd have the four inflowing rivers, and to the east of those rivers, on the east side of it, is a literal garden. That could be also considered what is Eden. I'm not overly dogmatic about these things. It's not relevant to our salvation, if you want to call it that. It is relevant to knowing the truth, though. So if we can have confirmation of things with multiple witnesses, that's what we should hold to. when we don't have those things, we can't be dogmatic about what we can't prove. Sorry about that, but we will continue. It says, and Japheth also divided the land of his inheritance amongst his sons. And the first portion came forth for Gomer to the east from the north side to the river Tina. And in the north there came forth from Magog all the inner portions of the north until it reaches to the sea of Ma'at. And for Madai came forth as his portion that he should possess from the west of his two brothers to the islands and to the coasts of the islands. And for Yawin, that's where we get the word for Greece, right? The Greek people, although the Greeks are amalgamated. But and for Yawin came forth the fourth portion, every island and the islands which are toward the border of Lud. And for Tubal there came forth the fifth portion in the midst of the tongue, which approaches towards the border of the portion of Lud to the second tongue, and the region beyond the second tongue unto the third tongue. And for Meshech came forth the sixth portion, all the region beyond the third tongue, until it approaches the east of Gadir. Excuse me, sorry about that. So you see, Meshech was given the area what we'd call Spain, not Madai. But wherever Madai wanted to be, he still left and took an area in the Middle East with his father-in-law, as we're going to read here. As for Tiraz, there came forth the seventh portion, four great islands in the midst of the sea, which reached to the portion of Ham, and the islands of Kamatori came out by lot for the sons of Aparkshad as his inheritance. So just for clarification, there's some islands that are Kamatori that are for Shem's allotment, for Parkshad over here. But the rest of these islands were for Yawin, which was the Greek archipelagos or whatever, all those little islands that form the part of Greece, which is Yawin. Tubal got the tongues here, the second and third. Meshech got until you got to Gadir. Madai was north, but Madai did not want this land. All of the land here, the mountains of Kelt, where the Germans and Celts took over, that's what Madai left. But you see, Italy could not be theirs. Greece should not be theirs. Further on, where you have the Samaritans and where the Sarmatians are, and became a partial Mongoloid people mixed with the Hebrews. But these were Mongoloids to begin with. These are sons of Japheth. And when the sons of Ham, Cush, and Nimrod were making conquests and setting up kingdoms and ruling over peoples, some of them migrated. They left and went to the far east, past Shem, to a land that was not occupied by any, where they founded the first Chinese dynasty. And these are known facts of the etymology for the Kittim can be found over there, and for the sons of Yahweh. But this is a lot of the history that we don't have quite distinctly because we believe, or we've been taught to believe, that Europeans were sons of Japheth. And that has been something that's been hidden from us for a very long time, as foretold in Scripture. And it was all the way by the time Alfred the Great was codifying the common law in England in the 800s or the 9th century AD, he believed he was of the genealogy of Japheth. But he wasn't. He was of the kings of the sons of Yahuda specifically. All right, to continue here, it says we read that part. So we're on verse 14. It says, and thus the sons of Noach divided unto their sons in the presence of Noach their father, And he bound them all by an oath, imprecating a curse on everyone that sought to seize the portion which had not fallen to him by his lot. And that's the part that we have to be mindful of. Whether there was an allowance of the sons of Shem being in Meddai's area because Meddai abdicated for Shem's area, I can't say. There's no mention of that. But like I mentioned to you before, if the sons of Canaan, as we're going to read, were perpetually cursed for stealing this land after making an oath not to the point that they were to be completely wiped out, man, woman, and child, when the children came into the promised land. Nobody living in any area that was given to another in this entire section that was not invited that's there by force can stay there without having that very same type of curse on them. It's not possible. And they all said, Amen, Amen, or so be it, for themselves and their sons forever throughout their generations till the day of judgment, on which Yahuwah Almighty, or Yahuwah Elohim, shall judge them with the sword, or a sword, and with fire, for all the unclean wickedness of their errors, wherewith they have filled the earth with transgression and uncleanness, and fornication and sin. And that would have been brought in by, again, Ham, the first magician. The institution of these kingdoms and idolatry that was brought in, right about what we're going to read here as a summary, but not in detail. And then, I'm willing, it'll help tie in histories and things as we go on. But Yobelim chapter 10, unclean demons began to lead the sons of Noach astray. It says, in the third week of this Yobel, the unclean demons began to lead astray the children of the sons of Noach, and to make to err and destroy them. And the sons of Noach came to Noach their father, and they told him concerning the demons which were leading astray, and blinding, and slaying his sons' sons. And he prayed before Yahuwah his Elohim, and said, Yahuwah of the Ruach oath of all flesh, so he who causes it to be of the Ruach oath, or spirits of all flesh, who have shown mercy unto me, and have delivered me and my sons from the waters of the flood, and have not caused me to perish as you did the sons of perdition. For your free unmerited pardon has been great towards me, and great has been your mercy to my inner being. Let your free unmerited pardon be lift upon my sons, or lift up upon my sons. And let not wicked ruachoth, or spirits, rule over them, lest they should destroy them from the earth. But do you barak me and my sons, that we may increase, and multiply, and replenish the earth. And you know how your watchers, the fathers of these ruachoth, or spirits, acted in my day. And as for these spirits which are living, imprison them and hold them fast in the place of condemnation. And let them not bring destruction on the sons of your servant my Elohim, for these are malignant and created in order to destroy. If you remember, they were given what they were given to do in the book of Hanok, and already is gone over in detail there. You can see here when the demons were saying, are you meant to destroy us before the time? They would accuse our Mashiach of, when he would tell them to be quiet and cast them out of men, because they knew there was a judgment in store. The ones that were out were only the 10th part. They were not the whole multitude of them, but 9 parts here were brought into the place of condemnation to be kept until the day of judgment because of the prayers of a righteous man. And let not, and let them not rule over the spirits or ruachoth of the living, For you alone can exercise dominion over them, and let them not have power over the sons of the righteous from henceforth and forevermore. And Yahuwah our Elohim bade us to bind all. And the chief of the spirits, Mastema, which his that name is a title just like Satan. It means reviler or hater. He came and said, Yahuwah Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them listen to my voice and do all that I shall say unto them. For if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will on the sons of men. For these are for corruption and leading astray before my judgment. For great is the wickedness of the sons of men. And he said, let the 10th part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation. And one of us he commanded that we should teach Noach all their medicines, for he knew that they would not walk in uprightness nor strive in righteousness. And this is the first mention that I'm aware of that not walking in righteousness leads to being sick or having a need for medicine. These same medicines, all these writings that you'll see they were given and he wrote in a book, and then he gives them to Shem in the Phoenician history before you even get to it when they're talking about the things beforehand, trying to make remarks about the genealogies and whatnot. It distinctly mentions that Shemites, or the sons of Shem, had knowledge of herbs that they gave to other people. A direct connection between this information and that history, which is another proof of the validity of it, just like you can see in the book called Missing Links Discovered in the Assyrian Tablets by E. Raymond Capt, where he's talking about artifacts that were found in Mesopotamia. Specifically, there was a type of plow that had a tube that would go down where you could drop the seed into the ground directly and you wouldn't have it laying above it where the birds can eat it. That was something that was invented by Abraham, mentioned in the book of Yobelim here. There was an actual artifacts discovered in the area from those times. So it's corroborating witnesses to the legitimacy of what's in here. Although in E. Raymond Cap's book, they don't can make the connection to Abraham. When you look at what he was said to do and you look at that implement, you can see directly where it came from, however. But it says, and we did according to all his words, all the malignant evil ones we bound in the place of condemnation, and a 10th part of them we left that they might be subject before Satan on the earth. Mastema, the hater or reviler, is the same as Hashatan, the adversary, right? Devil is another title. Just like when you have deviled eggs, it means to stir things up. A meddler. It says, and we explained to Noach all the medicines of their diseases, together with their seductions, how he might heal them with herbs of the earth. Psalm 104, the herbs were made for the service of mankind, right? And Noach wrote down all things in a book as we instructed him concerning every kind of medicine. Thus the evil Ruach were precluded from hurting the sons of Noach. And he gave all that he had written to Shem, his eldest son, for he loved him exceedingly above all his sons. And Noach slept with his fathers, and was buried on Mount Lubar, in the land of Ararat. 950 years he completed in his life, 19 Yobelim, and 2 weeks and 5 years, 1659. So generally around the time where the Masoretic text says the flood happened is when the death of Noach happened. Not quite the same, but about 300 years difference. And in his life on earth he excelled the children of men, save Hanok, because of the righteousness wherein he was perfect. For Hanok's office was ordained for a testimony to the generations of the world, him being that seventh letter, the Zion, or part of the full-fold aspect of light that we covered in the first day's works of our Creator, foreordained. This is another reference to that, right? For Hanok's office was ordained for a testimony to the generations of the world, so that he should recount all the deeds of generation unto generation till the day of judgment. And in the 33rd Yobel, in the first year, in the second week, Peleg took to himself a wife, whose name was Lomna, the daughter of Sinar, and she bare him a son in the fourth year of this week, and he called his name Reu. For he said, Behold, the children of men have become evil through the wicked purpose of building for themselves a city and a tower in the land of Shinar. And this is after the divisions happened in his life, but they were building the tower while he was growing, and that's when he named his son his evil, right, for what was being done. Just a little bit of connection now. Well, in his days, the Tower of Babel still happened, and it was within two generations of here that the Greek language was first created. The writings for it didn't come until after. Um, just you can see the connections here. Before the Tower of Babel, everyone was speaking Hebrew, and afterwards it changed. So you can see um, some of what they call Phoenician might not be contemporary with the Hebrews, but predating them. We just don't have all the answers all the time. It says, For they departed from the land of Ararat eastward to Shinar, for in his days they built the city and the tower, saying, Go to, lest let us ascend thereby unto Shamayim. And they began to build, and in the fourth week they made brick with fire, and the bricks served them for stone, and the clay with which they cemented them together was asphalt, which comes out of the sea and out of the fountains of the water in the land of Shinar. So that they used the tar, the pitch, and the clay to make cement and to build bricks, right? And they used that to build a very massive tower. The whole point was to reach to the firmament. It wasn't just to build an observatory or something for pagan worship. It was literally, remember, the adversary wants to get to the heart of contradicting what is given for promises, and everything our Creator says to do, he tries to thwart. So when he said, Be fruitful and multiply, spread across the earth and subdue it, he goes, No, we're going to have you all clustered together. You're going to be constrained. You're not going to be able to be fruitful. We're going to have you in one spot, and you're going to rebel and not spread out. And instead of going all over, you're going to build one place where you can just like stick it to them, flip, you know, the worst possible thing, and then to thwart against the flood again, build a tower to prevent it. That's the kind of insanity that the adversary gets people to do, contrary to the truth that's given. And they literalize the spiritual and they spiritualize the literal. Another phenomenon that you're going to see here over and over again. This is, and they built it 40 and 3 years, from 1645 to 1688. So they did not start building until after the death of, or I'm sorry, it says 1659. So they started building that before the death of Abraham, or Noah, I'm sorry, within the life of Ham while he was supposedly ruling there and rebelling against his father and hatching out his own kingdom. I don't know all the details within the history there, but that Phoenician history covers these things in more detail than what we have here. But you can see it is mentioned that these things were happening contemporary with his life. And this is why he exhorted his children to not turn away and to do wicked things that they were doing. But how far they were gone into it, he may not have been aware of at the time. It says, and they built it for 43 years from 1645 to 1688 Anno Mundi. Where they, or were they building it? Its breadth was 203 bricks, and the height was the third of one. Its height amounted to 5,433 cubits and 2 palms. And I would stipulate that these would be the Egyptian cubits, just like the Noah's Ark was. What they call the Royal Egyptian cubit, longer than the later Hebrew cubit of the Masoretic text, which I don't believe was ever used in any of the buildings. The Ark was using the Royal cubit that they say is the Egyptian. The temple used the same dimensions, the same cubit, and this is probably the same one as well, which makes this a very, very large. I'll have to look up the exact details there, but I'll get the numbers for you later if I can. Either way, its height amounted to 5,433 cubits and 2 palms, and the extent of one wall was 13 stades, and of the other 30 stades. So it was not a square, more like a rectangle building of a tower, but one wall of it was 13 and the other was 30. Quite a bit difference. And Yahuwah, our Elohim, said to us, behold, they are one people, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be withheld from them. Go to, let us go down and confound their language, that they may not comprehend one another's speech, and they may be dispersed into cities and nations, and one purpose will no longer abide with them till the day of judgment. This is the one purpose they had with their tower, the pre-shadowings or the foreshadows of their one world order, if you will, that was broken up by the Tower of Babel, which is the letter Tet of his works in creation after the flood. But this is the course that we're returning to after the breaking up of monarchies. This was before that, and then they breaks up into kingdoms again, right? But after the downfall of monarchy, with our people reverting back to that, now you have this one world order conglomeration being worked on before the flood, if you want to call it that, or his return, and then the millennial reign. So it's a reversement of things that brought us out of the garden, taking us back to it, kind of thing. That's what I was talking to you about. That's how that part plays out. At least that's how I've seen it. It part of that, when you look at it like the menorah branches, if you will, him being in the center. And Yahuwah descended, and we descended with him to see the city and the tower which the children of men had built. And he confounded their language, and they no longer comprehended one another's speech. And they ceased then to build the city and the tower. And for this reason, the whole land of Shinar is called Babel, confusion. Also, Bel, where we get Bel is the confounder. That was a name for Cush and a name for Ham. They say that Cush was more responsible with the Tower of Babel stuff, and Nimrod came afterwards, founding the kingdoms of Nineveh and the Babylonian, what we'd call the first Assyrian Empire. It says, for this reason, the whole land of Shinar is called Babel, because Yahuwah did there confound all the language of the children of men. And from thence they were dispersed into their cities, each according to his language and his nation. Now, I don't have anything but conjecture here and postulations. However, we can always base what has been off of what is and what will be, the things that are written. We know that people don't have problems unless they deserve it. And I want you to see the consequences, the cause and effect, if you will. Canaan, the son, the father of Salach, right? The son of Parkshed, or the son of Shem. got the Watcher's writings, the astrology, if you will, wrote it down, and he started teaching it to his children, kept it secret from Noah, and that was a sin attributed to him. Because of this wickedness in his land and his people, the sons of Ham were allowed to come in and subjugate them. And they conquered these areas and put their own will over the people for a good while. The men that should have been leading or ruling in these areas, the patriarchs of their families, Abraham, were in positions of outcasts and exiles, while the enemies were ruling over them, a type of things that you can see later on, right? Now, there's cause and effect for all these things. There's more things playing out, but I just want to point these things out to you so you can see a little bit for why things were happening the way they did. Okay? It's always consistent with what is in his word because he speaks and it happens. He states what reality is, right? And Yahuwah sent a mighty wind against the tower and overthrew it upon the earth. And behold, it was between Asher and Babylon.